Audiences were astounded by the brutal assassination scene in 1947's Out of the Past. However, Robert Mitchum's subsequent actions were quite startling. For decades, Hollywood concealed it. The lost footage has finally been revealed, revealing a moment that was so calculating and morally corrupt that even noir aficionados were taken aback. This scene, which encompasses a hidden corpse and deliberately planted fingerprints, represents the transition from darkness to depravity and the genuine cause for its confinement. The novel Build My Gallows High by Daniel Menwaring, published in 1946, marked the beginning of a significant development. It recounted the narrative of Red Bailey, a former private investigator who endeavored to transcend his past. However, his past refused to relinquish him. Many years ago, he became involved with a perilous woman named Kathy Moffat and her gangster partner, Whit Sterling. Whit now desires his return, and Red is compelled to comply. Just as the film would subsequently do, the book transitioned between the past and the present. It is amusing that Mainwaring did not even enjoy detective novels. He found them to be tedious and detested the task of determining the perpetrator. He desired to compose a work that was distinct, one that was more centered on faith than on enigma. That is what contributed to the story's rawness. RKO recognized potential in the manuscript and acquired the rights for $20,000, a substantial sum for an unpublished work. Initially, the film was intended to retain the original title, Build My Gallows High. It was logical. Red was a character who was unable to evade his own destiny. RKO, however, was concerned with ensuring that the film would be viewed by the public in 1947. They contracted the Audience Research Institute of Dr. George Gallup to evaluate their responses. The outcomes were unfavorable. The title was perceived as somber, akin to a film about executions. This resulted in financial difficulties at the box office. The studio was compelled to search for a more suitable appellation and ultimately settled on Out of the Past. In the interim, the script underwent numerous modifications prior to the film's completion. The studio believed that there were an excessive number of flashbacks and secondary characters. In order to rectify the situation, they enlisted James M. Cain, the author of Double Indemnity. However, his rendition was so dissimilar from the book that RKO rejected it. Cain diminished N's appeal and transformed Kathy into yet another predictable femme fatale. That was unsuccessful. Frank Fenton, a writer for B-movies, eventually arrived and resolved the situation. He combined two of the book's antagonists into a single entity and simplified the situation. He also penned some of the most renowned lines in the film, such as "You are like a leaf that the wind blows from one gutter to another." Despite his significant contributions, he was not acknowledged. Despite the completion of the script, the film continued to encounter complications. Warren Duff, the producer, was able to obtain 64 days for filming, a rare occurrence for a noir. Additionally, he was granted permission to shoot in Lake Tahoe to achieve a more realistic atmosphere. Then, the casting issue arose. Humphrey Bogart was initially the preferred candidate for the main role in Out of the Past. However, Warner Brothers declined to permit him to collaborate with another studio. Robert Mitchum, who was scarcely recognized at the time, was awarded the role in lieu of his star power, as they were opposed to his aiding a competitor. Everything was altered by that single decision. Mitchum's acting was seamless. He portrayed Jeff Bailey as a man who was exhausted and unable to fight, despite having already lost. He was a smoker. He maintained his composure and embraced his fate. He did not appear to be feigning anything. It struck me as genuine. He was equally enigmatic off-screen. He smoked marijuana on the set, teasing that it was a necessary component of maintaining his character. One of the most unusual incidents that transpired during the filming process was when he was en route to a location session. The aircraft collided with an outhouse after crashing through a fence. Mitchum exited the vehicle, brushed himself off, and hitchhiked the remaining distance to the location. He later chuckled about the situation, stating that the lighting in the film was so inadequate that the only genuine illumination was emitted by the cigarettes of the audience. He also continued to perpetrate pranks, such as informing a reporter that an inebriated extra was actually one of the film's producers. The studio was perpetually concerned about his future endeavors. However, the same disposition rendered him an ideal candidate for the position. In the meantime, Kirk Douglas was entering the film industry when he was cast as Whit Sterling, the affluent gangster. Although he was not the protagonist, he captivated each scene. Underneath, his character was raging with fury, despite his outward politeness. Jane Greer was nearly knocked over by his forceful strike during the filming. This was not included in the script, however, the director retained it because it heightened the terrifying nature of his character. Douglas and Mitchum harbored animosity in the background. Douglas was dedicated to his craft, consistently striving to improve himself, whereas Mitchum appeared to make minimal effort. They were in opposition, as they both desired to be the center of attention. Douglas later acknowledged that he intended to eliminate Mitchum in order to demonstrate his superiority. The intensity of their sequences together was further heightened by their rivalry. Conversely, Jane Greer nearly missed out on the opportunity to appear in the film. She was contractually bound to RKO, however, Howard Hughes, the studio's proprietor, harbored animosity towards her. He resolved to penalize her by prohibiting her from obtaining any positions. He even informed her that she would not be permitted to work as long as I owned this studio. However, Greer discovered a method to resist. She married and became expectant, and Hughes came to the realization that he would be defamed if he continued to pursue her expulsion. Consequently, he ultimately permitted her to portray Kathy Moffat, one of the most perilous femme fatale in cinematic history. Kathy was not merely another stunning woman in a noir film. She was merciless. She was capable of deceiving, manipulating, and even killing without hesitation, all while maintaining an appearance of innocence. Greer's portrayal of Kathy was praised by critics, who found it both captivating and horrifying. Nevertheless, RKO encountered significant troubles in 1947. In that year, the studio experienced a loss of $1.8 million. Despite the fact that they produced 39 films, which included Out of the Past. The budget for this film was $1.3 million, which was respectable for them, but it was still tight. They desired films that were produced expeditiously, rather than flawlessly. Director Jacques Tourneur and cinematographer Nicolas Musarasa were granted a mere 64 days to complete the project. They filmed a few sequences in Bridgeport, California and Lake Tahoe, but the majority of the film was shot on sound stages in Hollywood and Culver City to save money. The sights in Tahoe were a living nightmare. In order to circumvent Nevada's union fees, the crew was compelled to transport equipment across state lines. Local police temporarily prohibited filming at Lower Twin Lake due to a lack of appropriate permits. Money issues were prevalent. Jeff encountered Kathy at the Acapulco bar, which was not even a legitimate establishment. Remaining artifacts from outdated John Wayne westerns were employed to construct it at RKO's Encino Ranch. They had intended to conduct a significant car chase, however, they realized that they were unable to finance stunt drivers, so they abandoned the idea. Rather, they employed shadows to generate tension by filming close-ups of Mitchum's visage. Then, shortly prior to the film's release in 1948, Robert Mitchum was arrested, which resulted in a significant shift in the narrative. Mitchum was detected consuming marijuana with actress Lila Leeds during an LAPD raid on a residence in Laurel Canyon on September 1. This was a plot. The press was able to capture flawless images of Mitchum and restraints as a result of the police's notification to photographers. RKO was alarmed. They discontinued the promotion of the film and even entertained the possibility of omitting certain sequences featuring him. Howard Hughes, however, had a distinct perspective. He believed that the scandal would actually increase ticket sales. Mitchum was indifferent. He spent 50 days in prison, but it did not lead to his downfall, rather, it amplified his coolness. His mugshot became legendary, and guards permitted him to smoke while he labored. In prison, he was photographed milking cows for Life magazine, where he made the joke that imprisonment was similar to Palm Springs without the ruffians. It received enthusiastic responses from the audience. In the aftermath of the scandal, Out of the Past generated $2.1 million. The public was eager to observe the convict who outwits the law enforcement. In 1951, the conviction was annulled after lawyers established that the police had conspired against him. However, Mitchum was indifferent. He stated that the more unclean they perceive me to be, the more aptly I am suited for the role. In the interim, the film's aesthetic was one of its most distinctive features. Musaraka, RKO's Prince of Darkness, employed illumination to illustrate the character's morality, or lack thereof. The ideal example of Kathy's turning point is when she murders Jeff's partner. She appeared soft and innocent, illuminated by a warm radiance, prior to that. However, the light becomes harsh as soon as she murders. Her visage was obscured by profound shadows, which rendered her appear perilous. She stands in a doorway that is literally pitch darkness, indicating that she has crossed a line from which she is unable to return. Conversely, Jeff is ensnared in his past. Shadows from window blinds descend across his body in his petrol station scenes, resembling prison bars. No matter what he does, he is unable to progress. One of Musaraka's most daring strategies was to employ cigarette vapor as a narrative device. Jeff and Kathy are lying together after sleeping together in a critical scenario. The air is thick with smoke, which creates a cloudy appearance. The executives of the studio were not fond of it. Turner fought to retain it, despite their belief that it was excessive. Jeff and Kathy's ignorance of reality was symbolized by the smoke, according to him. Then, there was a scenario that was excessively intense. Jeff Bailey enters Leonard Eel's flat and discovers his deceased corpse. The majority of individuals would experience a state of panic, however, Jeff did not. He does not shriek or flee. He executes an action that is considerably more chilly. He retrieves the deceased individual and relocates them to an alternative flat. He is fully aware of his actions. He creates a chaotic crime scene by concealing the body in an alternative location. The police will now be unable to determine the date and location of Eel's death. This implies that the responsibility could be assigned to any individual, including him, Kathy, or Whit Sterling's criminal organization. However, this is the most peculiar aspect. Jeff does not merely conceal the body. He intentionally left his fingerprints behind. He ensures that the police will locate his prints by touching Eel's liquor decanter. It is as though he is eager to be apprehended, or perhaps he is aware that he is already too deeply entrenched in this situation to be able to escape. Kathy is concurrently engaged in her own game. She poses as Eel's secretary and contacts the building manager, pretending to be distressed in order to ensure that the body is discovered at the desired time. She is not frightened. She is in charge of the entire circumstance, ensuring that it is in her favor. In this society, everyone is either hunting or being hunted. Then there is the $40,000 bank account. It is idly awaiting discovery. Kathy is linked to an old homicide, the murder of Fisher, by the money. Jeff believes that relocating Eel's corpse will aid in his survival, however, in reality, he is allowing Kathy to further involve him. The body is not merely an issue that requires removal. It is evidence that he and Kathy are ensnared in a mutual imprisonment, incapable of emancipating themselves. Jeff endeavors to conceal the truth. Kathy transforms it into a weapon. The scene's cinematography intensifies the sense of gloom present. The room is replete with shadows. Jeff's expression is a mixture of light and darkness as he drags the corpse, as if he is ensnared between good and evil. The wardrobe in which he conceals Eel's is diminutive, resembling a coffin. It appears that he is concealing more than just a body. He is immersing himself in a transgression from which he will never be able to recover. The lighting from below creates silhouettes that rise up like prison bars, as if the world is closing in on him. The concept of concealing a corpse in a closet is not without significance. It is analogous to the adage skeletons in the closet. Jeff is literally concealing his secrets in the hopes that no one will discover them. However, the vacant flat in which he conceals Eel's is equally significant. It serves as a reminder that each of these characters is hollow within, perpetually endeavoring to fill a void that they are unable to fill. The camera's movement creates the illusion that Jeff is towering over his victim, as if he is a murderer poised over them. At the same time, it creates the illusion that the space surrounding him is reduced, as if he is confined. The camera remains fixed on the vacant room after he closes the wardrobe door. That is the reason it is so unsettling. Occasionally, the absence of a visual representation is more threatening than the actual image. The identical tactic is employed when Kathy eliminates Whit off-screen. While Jeff locates the deceased, her apparition occupies the entire screen. Even shadows have a function in this universe. The film nearly omitted this scene. In the past, Hollywood had stringent regulations regarding the depiction of criminality. The individuals responsible for censorship believed that Jeff's actions made crime appear too effortless, too ordinary. The audience was disturbed by his apparent composure while he was moving his body. Joseph Breen, the director of the censorship office, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards the camera's excessive attention to the deceased. He was concerned that it would create an overly realistic perception of violence. RKO, the studio, declined to modify it. However, this was not due to their desire to preserve the film's artistic integrity. They simply did not wish to allocate additional funds for reshoots, particularly in light of Howard Hughes' acquisition of the studio at that time. The scene's survival was contingent upon the director, Jacques Turner, discovering an alternative approach to the regulations. Instead of demonstrating Jeff's movement of the body, he captured footage of him entering and exiting the closet, allowing the audience to conjure up their own scenarios. That was sufficient to satisfy the censors while maintaining the impact of the sequences. The dialogue was meticulously crafted. Kathy once said to Jeff, "You are like a dead man." It appears to be a threat, but it is also a sarcastic reference to the regulators' efforts to purify noir films by refraining from depicting direct violence. When the film was released, critics were unable to reach a consensus regarding the assessment of this scene. Others harbored animosity towards it. The New York Times declared that it was deplorable and portrayed crime as a fashionable pastime. In addition, Jeff believed that he had discovered love. Kathy was a woman of beauty and charisma who appeared to be everything he had ever desired. However, everything changed in a single instant, within a tranquil cabin. Attempting to flee with Sterling, the perilous gangster they had encountered, they had been sprinting. However, Jack Fisher, Jeff's former companion, discovered them. He did not merely seek retribution. He desired a sum of $40,000 in cash. Additionally, he was unafraid to disgrace Kathy in order to acquire it. He laughed as if he had already triumphed, calling her a cheap piece of baggage. Jeff responded immediately. He delivered a strike, and the room abruptly devolved into disorder. It was not a choreographed film battle. It was authentic, unappealing, and unreal. Absence of music. There were no dramatic speeches, however, everything came to a conclusion with a single gunfire before Jeff could intervene. The gun was fired by Kathy after she had taken it up. Fisher expired. Kathy did not appear to be rattled as Jeff gazed at her, attempting to comprehend the events that had transpired. She simply stated, "You would not have killed him. He would have opposed us. You would not have murdered him." Jeff recognized the truth at that moment. Kathy had not murdered Fisher because she was obligated to do so. She did it because it was simpler and it allowed her to maintain control. Then, the evidence of her deception was revealed, a bank book that had been left behind, which demonstrated that she had stolen Witt's money. Jeff had previously placed his faith in her, however, he now recognized that she was solely concerned with her own interests. She did not experience feelings of fear or urgency. Ensured that she maintained a lead. Critics contend that this is what distinguished Kathy from other femme fatales. She never pleaded or behaved as a victim. She continued to persevere, as if homicide were merely a means to advancement. According to Carol St. Martin, a film scholar, Kathy was not merely a manipulator, she was a more amoral entity. She did not deceive individuals into fulfilling her desires. She made decisions, and if someone obstructed her, she removed them. Greer experienced repercussions as a result of portraying Kathy. Studios continued to provide her with similar roles following the release of Out of the Past. She later jokingly stated, "I was shooting someone in every script I received by the third act." However, Kathy's legacy endured. Characters such as Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct maintained the same vitality decades later. Women who did not rely on manipulation or plead, but who made their own decisions and never looked back. In the interim, the conclusion of Out of the Past was particularly startling for its era. In the 1940s, Hollywood films typically concluded with a happy conclusion, in which the hero either survived or justice was served. The opposite was accomplished by this film. In the concluding scene, Kathy shoots Jeff during a police ambush, however, the police open fire and kill her before she can escape. Both of the primary protagonists perish in a matter of seconds. The director, Jacques Turner, and the writer, Daniel Manwaring, were compelled to negotiate with the studio in order to achieve this conclusion. Jeff's survival was desired by the studio, however, they declined, asserting that it would undermine the narrative. The film was about fate, and fate was not going to allow Jeff to escape. The Hollywood Production Code, which ensured that films contained moral teachings, was also dissatisfied. They were dissatisfied with Kathy's unwavering depravity and her lack of remorse. However, Turner refused to modify it. This was a noir film, and in noir, destiny always prevails. The final firefight is rendered even more brutal by the manner in which it transpires. Kathy's anger prevents her from killing Jeff. This is due to her continued desire to exert control over the circumstances. She gazes at him and declares, "You are of no value, and neither am I." Then, she is fatally shot by the authorities in a chaotic exchange of gunfire. There is no moment of justice, no sense of victory, only two individuals are deceased in the front seat of a vehicle. It was a moment of surprise, particularly in the aftermath of World War II, when individuals were beginning to query traditional notions of heroes and villains. Subsequently, certain critics asserted that this scene accurately represented the sentiment of the era. Roger Ebert described it as terribly beautiful due to its depiction of the randomness and cruelty of existence. The hero's sacrifice in Casablanca, for instance, was significant, in contrast to the tragic endings of other films. It was a mere dead end. Subsequent motion pictures, including Chinatown, emulated this concept, where the hero is unable to evade his fate, regardless of his actions. In Out of the Past, Jeff and Kathy's relationship was a clever method of violating the Hays Code without actually breaching it. The code was characterized by stringent regulations. Movies were prohibited from depicting affairs or permitting criminals to escape punishment. However, the director, Jacques Tourneur, and the writer, Daniel Menwaring, circumvented these regulations by employing a subtle approach. Kathy emerges from the sunlight in Mexico when Jeff first encounters her. She is attired in a white dress. Her visage is partially obscured by shadows. The scenes do not depict them embracing or in bed together. However, the slow moments, the manner in which Kathy speaks, and the overall atmosphere of the scenes suggest that they are in a romantic relationship. It is evident that both individuals are aware that they are in over their heads when she states, "You are no good, and neither am I." Kathy's conclusion should have been entirely inconsistent with the code. Kathy kills Jeff, despite the fact that the laws mandated that bad characters be punished, and is subsequently killed in a police firefight. The issue is that she does not identify as a villain. I feel as though she is a tragic figure. RKO, the studio, devised a method to preserve it, despite the censorship office's objections. Their attempt to conceal her death as punishment was successful, as it appeared chaotic. The film also challenged the norms through Jeff's reaction to everything. The code mandated that films demonstrate the negative repercussions of making poor decisions. However, Kathy is never truly held accountable by Jeff. Rather, he simply concedes to it. He is not judging her when he tells her, "You are like a leaf that the wind blows from gutter to gutter." He is merely stating that this is the current state of affairs. Kathy's authority over males also resulted in complications with the censors. They were dissatisfied with her ability to manipulate men effortlessly, as she was not merely a romantic interest. In the initial draft of the script, she stated to Jeff, "I would kill to keep you." That was excessive. Therefore, they altered the phrase to, "I do not wish to die," which rendered her appear more desperate than perilous. Although these modifications were implemented, the film continued to demonstrate her influence. In a critical scene, she encounters Jeff in a dimly lit alley. Her face is partially illuminated by a neon sign as she informs him, "You are mine." There is no physical contact, which indicates that the censors permitted it. However, the manner in which the situation unfolds indicates that she is in charge. Additionally, Jeff's absence of guilt violated the regulations. According to the Hays Code, protagonists were expected to be morally upright individuals who had learnt from their errors. Jeff never accomplishes this. The studio was compelled by the censors to omit certain lines from his performance, such as the one in which he informs and that money is merely a tool, similar to a rifle. They removed it because it made crime appear too simple. However, rather than altering the film, the studio maintained Mitchum's facial expressions. Jeff merely smirks as he observes Kathy murder Fisher in a single scene. He refrains from uttering any words. However, the audience is informed of everything by that grin. The conclusion was equally perilous, and is deceived by the deaf-mute child in order to present Jeff as more superior than he actually was. The code was opposed to this, but the censorship office permitted it to be published because they perceived it as a cautionary tale regarding deception rather than a celebration of it. The censorship was even more severe outside of the United States. In France, the close-ups of Fisher's bloodied face and Kathy's calm reloading of the pistol were omitted, resulting in a reduction of the murder of Fisher from 45 seconds to 15 seconds. The removal of an entire subplot concerning tax fraud and blackmail in Britain was due to the perception that post-war administrations were corrupt. Oddly, this resulted in the film's love story appearing even more sinister, as the absence of the criminal elements left only Jeff and Kathy's doomed relationship. In West Germany, 17 minutes were omitted to eliminate any indication that Jeff and Kathy resided together in San Francisco. Removing a close-up of a bullet-riddled vehicle in the final shootout and reducing Jeff's sarcastic remark to wit, "You are an entrepreneur. I have heard that they are drafting new statutes for you." The movie's deeper significance was significantly diminished as a result of these edits, which reduced it to a more straightforward crime story. However, it is paradoxical that these mutilated versions ultimately had an impact on French filmmakers. The chopped-up version of the narrative created a sense of fragmentation and mystery, which Jean-Pierre Melville, a prominent figure in the French New Wave, admired. Out of the Past, 1947, generated a mere $90,000 in profit, which was considered small even at the time. However, that figure does not provide the complete picture. RKO Radio Pictures, the studio responsible for the film, was in dire straits. In the same year, it suffered a loss of $1.8 million, which could have been used to produce 3 high-budget films or a dozen lesser ones that actually generated revenue. At that time, movie theaters were exceedingly crowded. Approximately 90 million Americans attended films on a weekly basis. However, they preferred light and entertaining fare. People favored comedies featuring Bing Crosby or films such as Forever Amber, which was the year's most successful film. However, this was not the case in the past. The film depicted a world in which there was no escape, and even bright sunlight appeared dark and menacing. Upon its initial release, critics were unable to reach a consensus regarding their assessments. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times praised Robert Mitchum's performance, describing it as magnificently cheeky. However, he also acknowledged that he was unaware of the situation. He even stated that the act of attempting to resolve the matter was a challenge in and of itself. Variety described it as a hard-boiled melodrama that provided ample reasons for viewers to remain engaged. However, the evaluations were inconsistent. Critics today hold a different perspective. They refer to it as effortless and even sublime folly. The film's intermixing of various genres was the source of the confusion. It was not merely a film noir, it was also a tragic love story. In a sense, it is a Western that depicts the retribution of destiny upon an individual who attempted to evade it. The second act, which was situated in San Francisco, was particularly frustrating for the audience at the time. Tax documents, betrayals, and a staged murder complicated the narrative. Additionally, audiences experienced feelings of disorientation. Jeff Bailey, the character played by Mitchum, appears to be perplexed when he declares, "I believe I am in a trance." However, it was only later that critics came to the realization that the film's convoluted, winding narrative was actually the point. It was not solely about a crime, it was about the unpredictable and perilous nature of existence after the war. Roger Ebert even referred to it as the greatest cigarette-smoking movie of all time, declaring that the moral fog of the film was perfectly mirrored by the swirling smoke. There was no certainty, and no one was genuinely innocent. Opinions were also divided regarding Jane Greer's performance. Variety regarded her as stylish and appealing. However, some critics compared her to Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity and considered her to be lacking. At that time, individuals were uncertain about the character of Kathy Moffat. Although her changing allegiances appeared to be arbitrary and unconvincing, the 1970s saw the emergence of second-wave feminism, which led to a shift in the public's perception of her role. Kathy was no longer perceived as a femme fatale, she was now perceived as a woman who exploited the way men perceived her in order to survive. What was previously perceived as frailty or inconsistency was now recognized as a strategic approach.